All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Bokeh Podcast. I am your host, Nathan Holritz, and it is good to be here. Happy Monday to you, for those of you chiming in. It's Monday, April 18th, and wow, I don't know. How was your weekend? Relaxing? Got to do something besides work? I hope so. Ready to kick off this week, though, and there's a lot of exciting stuff going on. We're starting it with this podcast interview today, and I'm going to introduce our brand new guest here in just a second. For those of you that are live streaming, don't hesitate to jump into the conversation, ask questions, comment, whether you're at facebook.com/bokehpodcast or youtube.com/bokehpodcast. Join in the conversation. Don't be shy. And then for those of you that are streaming after the fact, listening to the audio version after the fact, don't hesitate to join us. In fact, if you follow us on Instagram at Bokeh Podcast, you can keep up to date with the latest upcoming live streams. So make sure to do that. Come join us for the conversation. We'd love to have you as part of the conversation. Already have a comment from Casey saying, great, weather is finally getting nice here in Colorado. Okay, so we're starting the conversation with, with weather today, I guess. Thanks for joining us, Casey. And before I introduce my guest, just one more quick reminder, and this is something that I promised you all I would do before every single episode. I'm posting the receipt over on the bottom corner of my screen here to Charity Water. I made a donation to Charity Water today before the show, and this is something that I promised I would do before every episode. I'm just doing this as a means not only of accountability for my own sake, but also to encourage everybody listening in. Look for those opportunities to give back, whether it's to your local community, national, international organizations. It's amazing how far just a little bit of money can go in making a difference in someone's life. So look for those opportunities. All right, enough the intro, monologue. I want to introduce our brand new guest for today. I've got Tom Russo is with me. Tom, am I pronouncing your last name correctly? Russo, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Russo.
Okay, so I did that right. That's good. That's a good beginning to the podcast today. Thanks for coming to hang out with me and working through all the tech issues. And I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation today. I'm looking forward to this.
Same here. I think this is something that a lot of people don't necessarily quite understand. In comes to what we're going to talk about today. The weather's okay here in Philadelphia. It's cloudy, going to rain. So thank you for the Colorado weather update. So I know what it's like in Colorado. But it's going to be fun.
Well, I'm going to do, sometimes I get excited and jump into the conversation with our guests, and it looks like anytime I make a noise, it's cutting off your audio, so I'm going to try to stay as quiet as possible today. I shouldn't interrupt anyway, but I don't feel as though I'm being robotic in our conversation. I'll let you finish what you're saying, and then we'll keep going. We were running to a little bit of tech issues to break the fourth wall here for everybody listening in before we got started, so forgive us for the delay, and we're going to try to make this work as best as possible. And again, for those of you live streaming with us, don't hesitate to jump in, comment, ask questions. We're going to be talking about storytelling, and more specifically, Tom's approach to storytelling on a wedding day as a photographer. And I'm really curious to get into this. It's not something that I really thought about as a wedding photographer as much. And so I'm curious to get your perspective on that, Tom. Before we do that, though, a few questions. And let's actually start with brand position. And while we're doing this, I'm going to pull up your website. And for anybody listening in, or for those of you that are streaming with us, if you go to Tom Russo, TOMRUSSO photography.com, got it pulled up here on the screen. And Tom, introduce yourself, introduce your brand, if you will, and let us know what your brand position is.
Yeah. So hi, guys. My name is Tom Russo from Tom Russo Photography. I am based, in New Jersey. I live close near to Philadelphia. I'm right outside, over the Ben Franklin Bridge, actually. My fiance and I live here in Collingswood. I started the company officially like 3 years ago. We got into weddings heavily through, working really hard through the pandemic and just gearing up for what was one of the busiest seasons, which was last year, and now really taking a giant leap into the 2022 season. We just love what we do. We have some fun, and we capture the best of the weddings in the best detail possible. And what lends to a great story is the detail, ideally.
The detail. Okay, I need to jot that. I kind of do old school note taking during these podcast interviews, so I'm going to jot that word down. We're going to come back to that word detail in just a little bit. Talk to me about brand position, though. This is something we discuss quite a bit here on the Bokeh Podcast. There are a lot of photographers out there, and there are different ways that we can set ourselves apart from the competition, but one of those ways is by having a distinct brand position, position statement. And if you were to sum that up, like in a sentence, what differentiates you from the photographers in your market?
I mean, one sentence for me, for those who do know me, is not easy to do, but one sentence I would say is that we're able to capture and tell the story of a wedding day in the most unique and timeless and classic way.
Hmm.
I get a lot of feedback from our clients and our couples, and even on the initial call that we set up with them, and a lot of it is your work is timeless and classic, and that's what we go for. When you look back at the wedding photos 25, 30 years from now, you can say, oh, our wedding photographer was great, our wedding was great because they were able to capture it in such a timeless and classic way. And that's what we do, that's what we strive to do. We have a full team of people here at TRP that we send out every weekend, and that's my biggest thing with our team, is make sure you're capturing it in the greatest detail possible, as well as being timeless and classic.
Cool. Okay, so I want to transition from that then to a question about client experience.
Mm-hmm.
And in the wedding photography world, in fact, the professional photography world now, we know that just taking a pretty picture doesn't do the trick. There are a lot of people that can do that. We can do that with a phone for that matter. Right. So experience matters. I'm curious what big idea is driving the client experience that you're creating for your clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would sum it up in 3 words: trust, communication, and commitment. That's what I live every day by, building a clientele pool that you can gain trust easily off the first call. You stay committed to each and every one of them, and you are communicating with them throughout the entire process. We as photographers, we try to do everything we can. We take on as much as we can. We literally won't sleep for weeks. And it's keeping that line of communication open. And even if someone reaches out to you 6 months before their wedding or 6 months before their shoot, asking you a question, it's okay not to answer that couple or that person right away. But keeping that open line of communication is key. Building trust is a lot of things. One of the things a lot of photographers don't do, or forget to do, or don't realize that they're not doing. And then staying committed to each and every one of them. It's hard to manage 50 plus weddings, 60 plus weddings a year when you have other people on your team and you're able to, we're going to go into this in a little bit, but delegating to different people and just being able to focus on what's the most important. And I mean, I push those 3 terms with my team and with myself every single day, building the business, starting over 3 years ago, to where we are now. It was because I trusted, I had people trust me, and then I had an open line of communication.
That's good. Okay, so again, taking notes, old school with my notebook here, but trust, communication, and commitment. And it's interesting how those concepts kind of they play off of each other. Like if you're communicating really well, it helps build trust, right? If there's proactive communication, proactive expectation management, it helps build a sense of trust. The client knows they can relax, that you're going to take care of them, and that also shows a certain amount of commitment to their experience as well. So it's interesting how those all kind of interplay. And I think these are really powerful principles for everyone to keep in mind. You said communication is, I think you said it was, communication is something that photographers don't normally do that much, did you say?
It's that and building the trust.
Okay. And why do you think that is? Like what is keeping them from doing that more proactively?
I mean, there's 2 things. It's lack of brand position, and it's there's 3 things. Okay, there's 3: lack of brand position, lack of consistency in their work, and then them not being who they truly are on that initial Zoom call or client or in-person sales meeting. A lot of things that I've learned over the years is that you need to be yourself and calm people's fears, answer all their questions, and allow them to just say, okay, I trust this person. And a lot of people, I think that they're too wrapped up in booking that wedding, closing that sale, doing whatever they need to do to get to that stage, that they forget about that stuff. The last thing that I worry about is making the money. The money will come. I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried about, do these people trust me enough to capture the day? Do they trust me in a way that I can tell their story? I can give them the greatest detail. And then, that allows for that open communication. And, when the people walk away from their wedding day and they get their final gallery and their albums, they can refer you, and they always have positive things to say. Like, that he was great to trust. She was great to work with. You can trust that they're going to get this done. And And that's kind of, I think, a lot of things that people miss is that they need to trust, they need to gain the trust, stay committed, be communicative before that they can actually, book the sale or book the wedding.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, and I have to say too, I mean, I haven't known you very long, Tom. You and I had the chance to meet at a workshop not too long ago, but I will say that just from even then, for those couple of days that we hung out, getting to meet and have conversation with you, you did just that. You're a great communicator. I know you said you like to talk, and so do I too. I have to be careful too to kind of cut back a little bit, but I think a willingness to engage with somebody just naturally, where it's not forced, it's not robotic. You just want to connect with somebody. People can sense that. And it helps set them at ease right away. There's also, I mean, you talk about I think you were kind of alluding to this idea of being genuine as well. And that's definitely something that I felt from you as well. I didn't feel like I was getting one version of you, that you might be something else another time. You were very consistent in that. And again, whether it's in personal relationships or professional relationships, it's huge. I think it's so easy in modern day age. That sounds I sound like an old man, modern day. 2022 culture, though, seriously, especially with social media, to put on one face here and then another face here, and I don't really see the purpose in that in most cases.
It's funny you bring that up, because that's, I think, what a lot of people are not doing, is they're not being a genuine person. I know I have said to, colleagues of mine and friends of mine that say, it's just unfortunate there are some people in this industry who are just not cut out for it. And it's not because they don't know how to shoot or they don't have the talent. It's because they're not a people person. That's one of the things that when I was in school, I actually have a degree in music education. Believe it or not, I played music for 12 plus years, and I just felt like it wasn't for me. So I got into the industry. Yeah, it's something most people don't know about me.
What do you play?
Well, I was a saxophone player. I was a clarinet player. I played saxophone from the time I was like 12 years old all the way till I graduated college at 22. So I did it for over 10 years. And I played clarinet. I was in every marching band, high school band, college, was in it all. And, I felt like that was going to hinder me later in life with, wanting to be interacting with people. I didn't want to teach. I didn't want to do any of that to deal with all the higher up stuff. So I went into photography and running a business. And, when it comes to being you and genuine and opening up to people and being vulnerable, that's another big thing a lot of people miss, is being vulnerable. It's a lot of stuff that I talk about with, my colleagues and, even some people that I mentor. You have to be you. Be authentic to you. I always use the example of, if you're going to go to Chinatown in New York City or Chinatown in Philadelphia, you're looking for that authentic Chinese food, right? You're not looking for, a Panda Express. And that's just kind of
How dare you? Panda is so good, man. Come on. Get that teriyaki chicken and the white. Oh, it's so good. No, I'm just kidding.
It's really good. No, I agree.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying for sure.
And that's it's just it lends not to being you. Authenticity and all these words that you hear, and when you put it in the perspective of like food, it registers with every single person you talk to. And that's another mark I think some people miss too.
Well, yeah, I think we've gotten really obsessed in our culture with this idea of authenticity, and I think the word, first of all, is it's overused at this point that it probably is watered down a little bit. And I don't quite know when like one person says authenticity, what that means to them versus another person. But I think at the very least, because I've been in the industry now for about 20 years and started when the industry was still at that place where, we were in the yellow pages, for goodness sakes. Like our business is listed in the yellow pages, and there was a certain sense of professionalism that you had to maintain in interacting with your clients. And we're way past that, not just in the industry, but in our culture now. And there's less of a need to put on a face for the sake of engaging with somebody. And at the very least, I think we can start there. Let's stop trying to put on a front for one person versus another. I mean, there's nothing wrong with maintaining a certain sense of professionalism. At the very least, you were talking about earlier, the significance of commitment, managing our time and showing up and maybe even a bit early and just doing the basic stuff. But outside of that, this idea that we have to put on some front for the sake of engaging with our clients, I think is just a major misnomer at this point. And I don't really know what the actual benefit of it is. And Dawn actually on Facebook has commented, she said, I've noticed that for some photographers, it's all about the money and not about the client as a person who has a memory or a special day they want us to capture. And that is so much more than making money. And yeah, Dawn, it sounds like you're very much in line with what Tom is saying as well. It starts with the client. I think photographers have been so obsessed with the so-called art and the craft for so long. And there's a lot of talk about that and a lot of ego associated with that. And it obviously matters to a point, but I think we need to get back to a focus on serving our clients. And it starts, as you're pointing out, Tom, with focusing on a genuine relationship. I think that's really important.
Right. And, you use that term, a screen warrior or whatever that people use. And that's the other problem. People are not afraid to say something or post something because they know that, they're typing it. They don't actually have to come out and say it. And then that also, then you actually go into person and they can't do it. So that translates to your sales calls. That translates to your everyday life. If you be who you truly are, how can you turn around and say, well, we're going to be there on the day of, and, we promise you this, we promise you that, and then you can't deliver because you don't know who you truly are. And that's another thing that I worked on heavily, was finding out who I am, where I stand, and where is my place. Stay within that barrier. Because if you try to become someone you're not, well, everything that we talk about and we try to be, and you're always asking these questions, just goes out the window. There's a lot that you really can go deep into, and we could be here for 2 hours talking about.
Well, I was gonna say, actually, I know we do have a lot to get to, but I want to park here for just a second because I'm curious about this. When you talk about being who you are, what does that mean to you? Again, a lot of people say that, and it's tied to this topic of authenticity. But to you, Tom, what does that mean to be who you are?
It just who I am with my family, with my fiance, and then my clients. Just be the same person. Accept the flaws that you have. Accept the way that you work. And for those who, for those who can't accept me for who I am, well, don't change for one person. You change for a lot of different reasons. You change for you. It's also self-reflection is another big thing. Self-reflect on situations that you maybe encountered or how you handled it. Also open, be very, like I said, vulnerable and open is another great way to helping you just grow. I was this nerdy band kid in high school and college and even elementary school who tried to make as many friends as possible because he needed to fit in. And then you graduate, and those 50 friends that you had in college, or however many friends you had in college, maybe more than that, they would drop off to be 2 or 3 because those 2 or 3 people are understanding who you are and take awareness of who you are. And that's why I'm always open to allowing people to be themselves, be who you truly want to be. And then from there, those who don't like who you are, well, then that means that they don't need to be in your life, and vice versa.
Sure. I guess what I have a hard time with when it comes to this conversation about being who we are is a lot of times the conversation stops at, well, who they are, right? Take a personality test, an Enneagram test, and they get a number, they get a type, and then people just kind of embrace that title and say, this is who I am. And I think from my personal experience in life and what I'm continuing to try to work through for myself is if this idea of who I am is static, then it's highly limiting. Right? I could be, in fact, it's so funny that you mentioned being kind of the geek in high school and, playing saxophone and clarinet. I actually did the same thing. I had a classical performance minor in college for a bit with clarinet. I played soprano saxophone as well. And I don't think I realized that we had that connection. That's pretty awesome. My son's actually a jazz saxophone major at University of Tennessee at Knoxville now as well. So I very much love that world. But, these are, we take on certain behaviors or behavioral patterns, and those behaviors can change. We can make a choice to change a behavior, whether it's we're playing an instrument or not, or we're talking in a particular way when we engage with our clients or not, or we engage with our partner, fiance, wife, whoever, or not. Like we make these decisions at the end of the day. So the idea that we quote unquote who we are and somebody kind of either has to accept that or not accept that, or we're going to be that, we're just going to be that person. I don't know. I don't feel like it's that simple, because I think there's opportunity to make changes to ourselves, to learn, to improve, to grow. And I may have particular behavioral patterns right now, but hopefully I'm continuing to develop what you were talking about earlier, that self-awareness, so that not just as an individual, but also as a business owner, I continue to get better. That's where I have a hard time with this idea of authenticity and who we are, because I don't think it's a static thing, or it doesn't have to be. I think for a lot of people, it becomes a static thing. I think it can be dynamic. I think it can change if we choose to take that responsibility on. What are your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree. There are people, excuse me, there are people who are still stuck in the collegiate party days, and they're in their late 20s and their early 30s, and they're complaining that they don't have a job and they don't have a partner in life. And that's what I mean by being you and self-awareness. And like you said, growing and changing. You should never change in the negative way. You should always change in a positive way. Sorry. And it should be something that you are aware of, even if you're, seeking professional help with a therapist, or, I do. I'll admit it. Like, I talk to a therapist every week or every month, and it's the greatest thing I ever did. 5 years ago, I decided, listen, I feel really lost and I don't know where I want to be in life and what I need to do. And just having someone there to talk to, that it doesn't have a biased opinion, doesn't really know you and will get to know you. And I don't mean like, you hear people like, oh, I'm going to move to the West Coast, or in the West Coast case, I'm going to move to the East Coast and start fresh and be someone else who I wasn't before. And that's not always the case. You can't always do that. That's not something you can just flip a switch in your head and say, well, I'm going to be a truck driver, and then I'm going to be a businessman when I move out to the other state. Yeah,
Well,
but there's little things you have to change in your life in order to get to that specific job,
well, and moving somewhere, you still have to take yourself there, right? So you still got to deal with yourself, your shortcomings, your questions, your doubts, your fears. That doesn't go away because we go to a different place. I'm like anybody else who likes a fresh start, even if it means like my house is I'm a little weird, but I like to clean the house, and I like to see the results of that cleaning, and it feels like a fresh start, right? But none of the kind of outward appearance, whether I'm moving to a different state or I'm just cleaning my house, none of that changes what's going on in here. And that's what we have to kind of take ownership and responsibility for. And I know, like you said, we could spend a couple hours talking about this, but I just wanted to go there for a second, because I hear so much, I read so much online and through our industry even specifically about this idea of being ourselves or not being ourselves, be authentic. And I think there's just some misconception, misnomers, or at least short-sighted thought processes as it relates to this idea of being ourselves that are quite limiting. Because I think at the end of the day, in fact, what I do personally, and this is just me, I know different people have different approaches to this, but I have a list of values that I review on basically a daily basis. And there are 11 values, and these values, it doesn't mean that I live them perfectly, but I'm actively not only keeping them literally in front of me so that I'm looking at them, reviewing them, thinking about what they mean, how that relates to my life, but I'm doing so on a daily basis for the sake of working toward being that thing consistently. If somebody thinks back to, knowing me for any period of time, and they can list even 3 or 4 of those values, Nate was, this, and this, then I feel like I've done my job. I'm trying to be a better human being certainly for myself, but for the people closest to me, and then my bigger, broader audience and connections and friendships in the industry and beyond. And I want to make an impact on people's lives positively through that. But that's me proactively deciding this is the person I want to be. I'm not out doing this. We hear this phrase a lot, like trying to find ourselves, as though like we're going to reach some finish line and we're going to know when we got to that thing. We're like, oh man, I found myself.
Right.
I don't know what that means. And I think we have a tendency in culture to just throw these phrases around without really thinking about what they mean, or even just whether or not they're logical. And like, what I would just encourage everybody to do, and again, I know we could keep going, but just for the sake of brevity at this point, I would encourage everybody listening in and watching. And by the way, we have a number of streaming. Y'all don't hesitate to jump in and comment and join the conversation. But I would encourage you to look or to make a decision about the person that you want to be. It's not about finding something. You're never going to reach a finish line, or, trumpets are going to sound in the background when you find yourself. You got to make a decision about who you want to be, and then do the work, put the work in to be that thing. And I think that's a way more productive and certainly more fulfilling way to approach life at the end of the day. So, Tom, I appreciate you kind of indulging me on that. I know it's a big topic and not necessarily photography related, although
That's okay.
again, I would say that our industry talks quite a bit about this. I think it's important that we get into it from time to time. Speaking of time, just briefly, if you will, tell me a little bit about, I guess, the big idea driving your effort at time management. You mentioned your fiance earlier. You've got a personal life, you've got a professional life. I know that they a lot of times mix, but how are you finding some sort of balance so you don't get burnout working all the time, making time for the important people in your life and other things you want to do besides be in front of a computer?
Yeah. I mean, it comes down to two things. It's discipline and dedication. You have to dedicate your time. There's a time and place where you need to say, honey, babe, I need to, do the work. I'm sorry, I have to work tonight, and designate and delegate some time to, getting some work done. But it's okay to say no. It's okay to say, this will get done tomorrow. That's what I used to not do. I used to be the person where I was working 15 hours straight. And it wasn't like I was doing anything fancy. I was in front of a computer getting work done for 15 hours straight, building the business. Yes, in the beginning, sure, you may pull a 15-hour day building your business and working on different aspects and getting your editing style down, working on your website, writing some copy, answering emails, editing photos. There's a ton of things that we do as photographers that most people don't think that we can or will do. So it's taking the time to do it. Take some time for yourself. It will be there when you get back. The clients, when you say, hey, I'm away in Disney World, like I just was last week. I'm away on vacation. I'm taking some time. I was away for 3 weeks straight, actually. I came home for 6 days. I shot a wedding, and then we went out again, and we were on a cruise, then we were away, home, and then we were away again. But those were the 3 weeks I needed awesome. Those. Now, when I got home, was it hard to get back into it? Absolutely, 100%. It's so difficult to get yourself back into that, that routine. But you just have to know when enough's enough. If it's getting up every day and starting your day at 8:15 a.m. and ending your day by 5:30 p.m. every day for 6 months straight, getting yourself into that routine, then do it. That's exactly what I did. I had to say to myself, how am I going to manage a personal life and a business life? What do I need to do? And it's creating a schedule, sticking to it, allotting certain times of the day to do certain things, and then time yourself, see how fast you can get something done without, ruining the quality of it. And then you'll start to see where your windows of time are to hanging out with your family or going on vacation. Or, the beauty about what we do as photographers, especially ones who run their own business, and this is all that we do, you make your schedule. You are the one who can say, I'm going to take a 3-week vacation. And no one's going to worry about it because this is what I want to do. That's what I love about one of the things I love about running my own business is I'm able to go on vacation, obviously when it makes the most sense. I'm not going to go on vacation in the middle of May. That's just stupid. But, for me at least, because that's my busiest time of the year. But going away on vacation in January for 2.5, 3 weeks, or going on vacation in the month of August, or just taking a staycation, you have the freedom to do that. So not only can you control your schedule, but you also, when you have a busy schedule, it's just saying, it'll be there when I get back, take a break.
Well, and you made an interesting statement there that I think has kind of broad-reaching significance, and that is that we make our own schedule. And it may seem like a simplistic idea, and somebody listening in, they're like, yeah, of course we do. But I would even push that person and say, but do you actually, though? Like, do you actually take ownership for the fact that calendar on your phone, on your computer, that is yours to make, and you can make the decision about how you are spending time? There's a phrase that people say that just drives me crazy. They say, I'm busy, or I was busy. And granted, we may in some situations actually be busy, but at the end of the day, we make time for what we want to make time for. And that's the simple of it. And like, I would dare anybody to try to argue with me otherwise. We make these choices for ourselves. And again, it goes back to that idea of responsibility, whether it's responsibility for the person that we want to make of ourselves, or in this case, time, the way that we manage time, and more specifically, how we manage that calendar, what we block off, the time we make not only for work, but for the important people in our lives, for taking a break, for going on an adventure, going on a cruise, go to Disney. I mean, that sounds like incredible stuff. So
Oh yeah.
I love that you're making that happen and even taking a lot of time to do that. When we talk about time management, one of the most important components of time management as a business owner is delegation. Delegating a task or a series of tasks to somebody else or to another company so that they are helping you. They're going to helping support your workload in running your business. Is this something that you've experimented with in your business?
Oh, absolutely. Um, if you ask anybody who knows me really well, for example, Christora Osters, for those who know her from Green Apple Photography, she's one of my best friends.
She actually
And
she gave you a shout out on
she
YouTube.
did.
Yeah.
There she
What's up,
is.
Christora?
So, anyways, this is fitting. So, Christora said to me once that you need to outsource your editing. And I said, you are just batshit crazy. I'm never going to do that. And she was like, no, you seriously need to do that because that's going to be the first step to you actually having a life back. This was over a year ago, and I did. That was the first thing I delegated, and then I went and I delegated social media, and I delegated videography, I delegated copywriting, I delegated almost everything except for emails, engagement session edits, and shooting. I mean, I shoot most of my stuff, but I have a team that shoots for me. It is the greatest thing I ever did. For those who want to delegate, do it. It is wonderful. You get so much time back. It's crazy. Now, when it comes to delegating, though, I feel that you have to trust those who will uphold your brand. Only if you know what your brand is, both visually and non-visually. A lot of people don't know what that is. If I turn around and say to somebody, hey, what are your core values? What is your how, your what, and your why of your golden circle of branding? They have no clue. They think they know. And if they do, great. I mean, that's awesome. But a lot of people don't know that. I didn't know that till about 3 years ago. And over time, your brand will evolve. Your core values, they will change, or they may not change, or they'll change slightly. It's being able to delegate in a way that people are able to follow. When I hired social media manager and coordinator, I had to sit there with them and show them how I ran things and what I looked for when it came to social media and how to grow it. I mean, hiring that position, I grew 50% in the business, maybe more at this point. And it's just because I was able to delegate and have people actually take the time to dedicate to that specific aspect of my business. And then with editing, I got so much time back to myself because I'm not sitting here culling and renaming and sorting and then editing and exporting. I've taken a huge chunk out of my workflow and delegated it to somebody else. Now, granted, the way that works is your brand, what editing style you use, and you use presets. That's it. I mean, whether you like to use presets or not, it allows for consistency in your brand. It allows for people to trust they know what they're going to get out of you. That goes back to the trust thing we spoke about earlier. And you can outsource. It's the greatest thing ever. And then as long as you are able to do all those things in a clear and concise way, that's it. Like, that's all you need to do is understand yourself and your business before you can delegate to others.
Yeah, you mentioned, or you described probably one of the most, if not the most significant elements of the process in the process of delegation, which is to be clear about what you represent, certainly as a brand, but then what you want. If you don't know what you want, you're going to have a nightmare of a time handing something to somebody else and asking them to do it, because you won't be clear in your communication. And there'll be a lot of confusion back and forth as you're trying to work through with this other person or this company what it is that you're even wanting in the first place, because you're not clear about that. So I'm really glad that you highlight that, because it is so important. Mm-hmm. For anybody who doesn't know, who's listening, and I own a company called Photographers Edit, and we've been working with photographers now for close to 15 years. And one of the most frustrating experiences, not just for us, but certainly for the photographer, when they try to outsource their editing to us, is when they aren't sure about what it is that they actually want. So they may want us to do one thing here and then another thing here, but then they're frustrated here, and our team's like, but wait, you said this, and and there's a lot of confusion and frustration that happens as a result. We have to be super clear. It's not about being fancy, and you may have to change things along the way, and that's part of the process of delegation, but you have to be clear about what it is that you're looking for up front in order to effectively delegate. I'm really glad that you highlight that. It's super important. And this is probably another place that we could kind of park for a little bit, and because communication is a really big element of that delegation process as well. And I'm sure you could speak to that, Tom. Maybe we can come back and do another episode on that at some point. But
That'd be great.
Your first recommendation to be clear about what it is that you want is just golden. And for anybody listening in, whether you're outsourcing administrative tasks or editing or album design or accounting, whatever it is, be super clear about what it is you're trying to accomplish up front. That'll make a massive, massive difference. One last question here before we get into kind of our primary topic today, talking about your style, your approach to storytelling and wedding photography. I'm curious, you seem like a type that does a lot of reading. Do you read a lot?
I don't.
Do you not? Okay.
No.
Well, so rather than normally I ask about a favorite business book or self-help book, maybe it's a podcast or even a particular source of education, because especially being relatively new in business, I mean, you're a super intelligent guy just from my interactions with you. I know you've crammed a lot, like you've taken in a lot of information in a very short amount of time. Have there been one or two particular sources of information that have been especially helpful that you might be able to suggest to our listeners?
Yeah. SchoolTube. It's a great thing ever. SchoolTube. YouTube. So I call it SchoolTube.
Okay.
It's YouTube. Yeah, it's just a term I've heard many times, and that's what I call it. Yeah, YouTube's great, guys. I mean, honestly, I am a firm believer is that you don't need a piece of paper to tell you could take a photo. It's plain and simple. I also firm believer that people have natural talent for things that in their field that they get into, whether it's an architect or or a web designer or a photographer or a bowler. You can learn anything that you set your mind to do. But it was YouTube. Doing style shoots was the greatest thing, or any technical aspects, because it's hard. It is hard, but you shouldn't be learning a new technique on a wedding day, on an engagement session, at a family shoot, at whatever photography you guys are into, as far as, what your niche is and where your brand stands. So YouTube, style shoots, honestly, even listening to Boca podcasts, when I came into the industry, 3 years ago, I listened to Jordan Crais's episode, and I was like, man, that's such a good podcast. And I would just go back and forth and listen to episodes and listen to people. Like, you had a guest on the show once that talked about Planoly. I discovered it. It was helped my business through social media, just scheduling posts and then just talking to others. Other professionals in the industry and interacting with them and picking their brain and just soaking it all in. Be a sponge. It's okay to not know everything. You just have to make sure that you stay, keep yourself in line. I call it the humble check. Stay humble. Always want to learn and grow, because then you'll be able to learn more faster. You'll be able to see your work, skyrocket. Christopher and I talk about this too, is we said that, every time that we come together in person with our group of friends, our work just goes to the next level. It's because not only are you shooting with people of the same intellectual level as you, but you're also learning something that they know that you don't know, or that they don't know or aren't as good at. So you're able to then pick their brain, because not only are you shooting with them, but you're hanging out with them, and you over dinner conversation, and you're able to just get as much knowledge as you can. I'm all self-taught. Everything I've done has been hands-on, out in the field, done it, tried it. If I failed, I fixed it and figured out how to do it again. That's really what it takes, is just, I don't read. So YouTube was my best friend for years, and taking business courses and just talking to people. That's how you do it, essentially.
But I'm hearing the theme there, which is curiosity. It's funny. I literally just this morning on my Instagram story, I posted, be curious. And this is something I've been reminded of even in the last couple of months. I mean, certainly as individuals, as human beings, being curious, genuinely curious, wanting to learn something new or wanting to learn more helps minimize that sense of ego. And again, the tendency to be static, to like get set in our ways. And this is how I do it. This is how I think. And there is nothing else. I was around way too much of that in my life. And it's exhausting, and it's highly limiting in many ways. And so being curious, certainly as individuals, makes us better human beings, makes us more interesting conversationalists,
right.
Makes us way better to be in any kind of relationship with. But then when it comes to business, maintaining that level of curiosity is super, super important. And especially with the way that culture continues to change and evolve, and our industry does as well. If our curiosity is minimized, if we're not open to new ideas, if we're not exploring the next thing, we're going to limit ourselves and our ability to grow potentially as business owners as well. So I think the curiosity piece is huge. And shout out to Jordan. I'm pulling this up here on our live stream. For anybody who's not live streaming with us, if you go back to episode 428 and then 214, prior to that, we had Jordan Caressis on. And Tom was just referring to Jordan. Jordan's a mutual friend of ours. And you can go listen to those episodes, episode 428 and episode 214 as well. And yeah, Jordan, speaking of wealth of information, that is Jordan as well. Super intelligent, super driven business owner. I want to go ahead and jump into our topic. I mean, we're already 45 minutes in, so we're gonna have to move here. But I want to talk about first of all, I guess this idea of storytelling. When you talk about the word or when we say the word storytelling or telling a story as a photographer, this is something that it's not a new concept in our industry. We've heard various people talk about it, but when you hear that word story, how do you define that for yourself?
Details. It's plain and simple. Telling it in the greatest detail possible from beginning to end and knowing where the beginning is and where it ends. You know, a lot of times photographers will say, "Oh, I'm only there for 8 hours." Okay. What are you telling in those 8 hours? Or I've met with photographers that have a package that's 6 hours and it's like full day wedding, 2 photographers for 6 hours. I'm like, okay, but what are you telling in those 6 hours? What story are you telling? Are you cutting off the prologue of the day and starting at the ceremony and ending at the reception? Are you starting off with the prep and you're skipping 5 chapters and you're going on to, you know, the ceremony and then the reception and you're cutting it at chapter 8 when the book is 12 chapters? It's you as the photographer. If this is all you do, working a 12-hour day once or twice a weekend shouldn't be an issue for you. You think about it, right? So if you have 50 weddings, okay, a season, for example, like I have more than that, I want to admit, but I have about 65 this season.
Wow.
Which is crazy to think, right? And so if you put that in perspective of someone who works a 9 to 5, okay, they work 9 to 5, 8 hours a day, or even if they work, 4 days a week, 10 hours a day, okay, they're working every week, 4 days a week at 10 hours a day, 40 hours a week. You as a business owner, physically out there shooting, if you're doing 3 days a weekend at 8 hours a day, you're only working 24 hours. If you put that in perspective, if you were to just drop everything you do, quit your business, drop it all, and just say, I'm going to go get a full-time job, 9 to 5, or whatever the hours are of the day, you're going to end up working more times out of the year than you would if you own the business. So that's what kind of makes me like a little frustrated with certain people that don't see it in that perspective is if you are willing to take on 50 weddings a season, for example, or even 30 weddings a season for most people that want to keep it kind of relatively smaller on the seasons, on the amount of weddings you shoot, and you're only working 8 hours a day, right? Why are you only working 8 hours? Why are you not staying or being there to tell that story in the greatest detail possible? We worked a wedding a couple weeks ago, and the bride was more set on her portraits with the groom than anything else, which is fine. And then later in the day, we came to find out all she really wanted to care about was the partying and the food and the drinking. Cool, as most people do on the wedding day. Well, she skipped over family portraits because she wanted to get to other things. I said, okay, I mean, if that's not important to you, that's fine. But in my head and from experience, I know that family portraits are not only a part of the day and create that story, but it's something everybody wants. So I made it a point to make sure that we captured that, because when I deliver that full gallery in 2 months, and she comes back to me and says, well, where are my family portraits? I can say, well, here they are because I took them, later in the night at the reception. So it's about telling the day from the start of the details with your flat lays or however you guys photograph details all the way till either the sparkler exit or the last dance, or if it's just dancing throughout the night, trying to capture every drunken moment or every awesome moment of the little kids and the grandparents. And that's the other thing a lot of people miss, is they don't think about everyone else outside the bride and groom. I've noticed that. So my second shooter, his or her responsibility is during the entrances, you're capturing candid moments of the guests around you. During the even the ceremony, I'm focused on them. You're going to focus on the family and make sure you get the parents and the grandparents and the siblings, because I read this once and it's so true. You very well could be the last person to take a photo of someone's grandparent. You hold that memory in your hands. And
Hmm.
that's so key to telling the story. You know, I'm okay with 200 candid moments of people just laughing and interacting because that helps tell the story. A lot of our couples, when they come to us, they say, we love your work because XYZ. And one of the things that they say is, we love that everything looks natural. It's not posed. And that there's a lot that can go into that. You can really expand on what the definitions of each of those mean. But for us, it's we do that because we want it to feel genuine. We want it to feel like you were seeing everything that you couldn't see on the day of. So, we have people in different places where we're capturing grandma's reaction of the bride walking down the aisle, or we're capturing Uncle John's reaction of him laughing to when his son, who's the best man, decided to crack a joke about the groom. It's those moments that some people actually do end up missing, that really enlighten, or I should say, enhance the story of the wedding day and how we approach the overarching hours of the day with the story that we tell.
So I'm curious, just to get, I'm going to be a good interviewer here and just push back, play a little devil's advocate, because I've heard the
Sure.
idea, I mean, certainly of story. I was a wedding photographer for over 10 years myself. I've been in the industry
Right.
for about 20 now. And the idea of story is not a new one. I get the sense
Mhm.
that maybe your approach is a little bit different. Would you say, but when you're talking about how photographers that you've noticed or observed have not paid as much attention, for example, to the interactions between family or maybe guests,
Mhm.
is that a common thing? Are you seeing a lot of that tendency?
A lot, yeah, a
And is
lot
the
more than
focus more just toward like fancy pictures of the bride and groom, stylized pictures of the bride and groom? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
I think that's what you see most of the time. I've seen and I've interviewed and I've tried to, look at as many photographers' portfolios as possible. And I mean, yes, everyone posts the best of the best photos. I mean, you go on our website, it's mainly just portraits of the bride and groom and the individual photos of each of them. That's what the bride and groom want to see, right? So like I've interviewed, photographers for our team, and I've looked at people's works and mentoring and doing some coachings, and I've done a lot of stuff, right? And you look at if you look at a full gallery of someone who is maybe, still learning and stuff like that, or who say, I'm the best at this and I want you to see my portfolio. And I go through it and there's nothing else there but a ton of like bride and groom dancing photos for the reception, and there's a ton of just portraits, or just the two of them. You have two angles of the same thing at at the ceremony, where it's like you're one person's in the center, the other person's on the other side, and you get that angle, and that's it. It's just that. It's not okay. That person who's on the side angle has turned around and captured all the crowd reactions of the people in the audience. You see it more than you think you would. At least I have. I've seen it in the sense of, that's the missing pieces of the story that some people just don't tell.
Okay.
And I don't think you can tell that in 6 hours of coverage, because there's so much. A wedding day lasts minimum 10 hours, maybe 12 in some cases. So, if the wedding day schedule is 12 hours and you're only there for half of it, you're missing half the story. And
Well,
half the story is the smaller details that make up that bigger story.
sure. Oh, absolutely. Well, a lot of photographers will talk about the idea of having a second shooter to capture candids, but I guess what I don't hear as much is specificity. It's just this kind of general
Mhm.
statement about candids. I like that you specifically have your second shooter focusing on those interactions. When
Mhm.
we say candids, we're specifically talking about candids, interactions between the family members and or the guests, and making that a priority. I think that's really interesting. So, and I mean, I know that you have a little bit of experience kind of teaching, speaking a little bit, Tom, and of course doing a podcast as well.
Mhm.
So I'd like you to kind of break this down for me, teacher style. Do you have like a certain number of key touch points in a day when it comes to like that, almost like an outline in your head of key
Oh
touch
yeah,
points in a day when you're trying to tell a story effectively?
absolutely. I mean, it's pretty much every major moment in the day. Everything that's standard to a wedding day, and then everything in between. We all say we have a flow, right? We all have points we have to hit. For us, it's you got to capture the details. Make sure you're doing, you're getting the bride's details, getting the groom's details, get the details. You're getting portraits of the guys getting ready and the girls getting ready, whether it's in robes, getting the tuxes on, if that's part of the day, getting the bride dressed, getting the groom dressed, doing solo shots of each bride and groom separately, doing photos with each bride and groom, like each groomsman, each bridesmaid with the bride and groom, and then just going down from there. You have your main pain points you have to hit every day, right? So every couple's like, oh, I really want to make sure that we capture, I don't know, pictures with my mom and I, because it's important to me, and that's part of what we do is that we are able to, again, going back to the trust, commitment, communication thing we talked about earlier, that's something you can, gain in that person. I mean, realistically, it's however you feel comfortable approaching a wedding day. I approach it very different than my best friend Nick would, right? I approach it differently than Christora would, or other, like even when Jordan was shooting weddings, different than when Jordan, how Jordan would approach weddings, and even for you too, we all approach them differently, and I think that it's really up to the person to, I guess, come up with those touch points that they need to capture the wedding day in order for them to feel comfortable walking away from the wedding day. There have been many times where I've been on a portrait session, or I finished up portraits, and I've turned to my second shooter and I say, did we miss anything? I feel like something's really off, and I feel like we don't have enough. And like I like walking away from the day, coming home and saying, I captured enough of this story to tell it. Because I worry about, what are they going to come back and say to me? Well, you missed this or you've missed that. So that's where the whole approach to the wedding day and the touch points for me comes in, is what in past experiences have couples looked for? And then I base it off that. I really wouldn't say that there's, other than seeing the overall vision of the day, there's really no, like, you must hit every single one of these points, because it really goes into how do you want the story to be told for your couples.
But I guess the reason I ask for points is I'm thinking about, especially a new photographer, right? They're like, okay,
Right.
I get the significance of storytelling, and sure, we're all going to kind of look for a lot of the same interactions. You're talking
Right.
about, the significance of details or getting ready or
Right.
individual portraits or otherwise. These are all pretty commonplace, but I didn't know if there was, I guess maybe those in between moments, if you've got a particular set of images that you're looking for in a day. And I guess maybe an even more specific question: Are you basing your photography on, say, a shot list that the clients give you? Or are you doing an interview beforehand that is driving some of your choices in that photography? Or do you tend to just kind of follow a typical template approach to the storytelling?
That's a really good question. I think it's a little bit of both for me, honestly. I think that every wedding that we shoot, whether it's myself or our shooters, we set up a meeting with the couple a week before their wedding day. We go over their timeline, we go over stuff that they want, and in our questionnaire they list anything specific that we make sure we hit. So I think, I mean, I guess you can say it's, for us, it's kind of both. Like, we have our template of shots we get every day, but every wedding, but we also have requested ones that it's, I don't know. It's kind of like, I want to say situational based.
Yeah, sure.
And I mean, if we really had to, like, for the newer photographers, out there in the industry who are saying, okay, tell Strobe what I need to hit, I would say it's, think of all the major things of the day. Right. So you have your prep photos, whatever that entails for you, whatever the bride wants, whether it's hair and makeup or details or just getting dressed. Some brides will request, I only want you there to when I put my dress on, and later I don't need photos of me getting hair and makeup done, or I don't want my details done. That's fine. I would say that, hit all the major aspects of the day, and then look for those in between moments. Like, if you're just standing around and the mother and the bride are, which is what I look for, if the mother and the bride are having an interaction and there's a moment there you can capture it. Just snap the photo, and if whether it's good or not, at least you captured it, and hopefully when you go home, it's as good as you hoped it would be, or it may be right on the spot. Looking for those, like, if the bride has a nephew or a niece who's 3 or 4 years old, and is just having a good time and interacting with the bride. That's stuff you want to capture. That's what helps tell the story. That's what I look for. I've had a bride whose daughter was, I believe she was 3 years old at the time, maybe four, and she put the mom's dress on. That's the moment you look for. Like, she just did it. Like, I was hanging in the hallway with a couple of the bridesmaids who I knew, who were friends of mine, who referred us to the couple. And I turned around, and sure enough, the little girl was in the dress and just snapped the photo. It's those in between moments that you look for to not only better better their gallery, but better your eye and your skill, and finding where can I enhance this gallery. Going back to what you were saying, the question, I just think it's situational for me. I think it really depends on what does the couple want us to do on the day of. One of the questions that I ask the couples in the initial meeting is, what are you looking for on your wedding day? What are you looking for the photographer to capture, and who are you looking for to capture your day? And that allows me to get a sense of, is this going to be a really detailed day where I need to really, step it up and really capture this day in every single possible detail I can? Or are they just looking for someone to be there to capture the big moments? And if I happen to capture something that's really authentic and detailed, I will. So I guess for me, it's situational.
Okay. Yeah. And Dawn was saying on Facebook too, when you miss those moments of interaction, you lose a lot of the feeling of the day. And it's very true. The nuance kind of gets lost, and it does feel a little bit more template-y, if you will, if that's a word.
Yeah, it does.
And then Nestor on Facebook was also saying, some call what he's describing photojournalism, others call it storytelling or visual journalism. The more one captures, the more pictures one can put on albums or photo enlargements. And I guess I have a question. And by the way, thanks for everybody who has commented in and joining the conversation. Really appreciate that. And y'all don't be shy here as we're finishing up to throw any other questions or comments in that you'd like. But to Nestor's point as well, I'm curious about, like, when you approach storytelling with such an attention to detail and trying to get all those in between moments, is there a tendency to kind of overshoot almost? Like, how many images are you setting as a goal, if you will, to photograph, or even not even just to photograph, but to deliver to your client at the end of the day?
It's a really good question. It's a two-parter. So the answer to the question is, are you overshooting? The answer is yes. But it's okay to overshoot in some aspects. It's obvious, right? If you're trying to capture every little in-between detail, you're going to walk home with 5,000 photos just for you. Imagine if you had two shooters doing the same thing. It's like 10 grand. It's ridiculous. But when we return a gallery, I try to do one in every four, maybe one in three. It depends on the gallery. So it depends on the wedding, I should say. So let's just say we shoot 4,000 photos. Between the two of us, we're delivering roughly 1,000 images in the final gallery, sometimes a little more depending on what was captured in those 4,000 images. I've showed up to weddings where we have three shooters because of just the vast size of the wedding. There could be, we're doing a Orthodox Indian wedding on Saturday of this week, and I'm showing up with actually four shooters for the ceremony because of the detail that we just got off a call right before we jumped on the show, and the amount of detail that they need or they want captured. It's not even more the couple, it's more the parents. So that's where I'm preparing for four shooters. I'm going to have a lot of photos, and I'm going to be able to tell that story in the detail that they've requested. So yes, you overshoot. That's obvious. And guys, it's okay if you overshoot because, let me rephrase that. It's okay if you overshoot with a purpose. If you're just clicking away and hoping you get something good, that's the bad type of overshooting. But if you're overshooting, you can scroll through your camera or look at the gallery before you deliver and say, wow, I really captured this in so much detail. That's the good type of overshooting.
One last question about that here as we're finishing up. When you talk about delivering 1,000 images, and I think back actually to when I was actively photographing as well, we were probably delivering on average maybe between 600 and 800 images to our clients. But I'm curious if you think that we're getting to a place in our industry where, the attention to detail is so important, but it seems like we should also be considering the quality of the images that we're giving. Like, if we're delivering 1,000 images or even 800 images, are we actually delivering like super high quality 1,000 images or 800 images? Or could we cull that even further and deliver an even more impactful set of images, number one? Right. Two, that these clients are going to actually look through. Like the idea of looking through 1,000 proofs. I remember when I got married years and years and years ago, our photographer, I think, gave us maybe 150 pictures, and they were prints at the time. This is back in the days of film, but That's what we got from the day. And I mean, honestly, I would say that it captured the day pretty effectively. Now, he wasn't there for the kind of the prep period, so you could have added a few more images for that had he been around. But the idea that we're delivering 800 to 1,000, I know some photographers are delivering even more, 1,200, 1,500 images. It seems like overkill, at least from the outside looking in. What are your thoughts on that? And maybe I don't know if there's a better approach to it, but at least a thoughtful approach to it.
I would say it's really up to the interpretation of the photographer. Yes. Do you risk quality of the images? Absolutely. I mean, when I first started doing this full time, I would deliver 1,500 to 2,000 images, which is a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot. Now, granted, some of the weddings that you do shoot, when you are saying, okay, I'm going to deliver 600 to 800 to 1,000, but you end up delivering double that, it's because the wedding specifically called for that as far as what you shot in the day. Like, I'm preparing to deliver close to 2,000 photos for Saturday's wedding, but I know that going into it that we have a lot to capture. I would say it really depends on how the photographer captures the day, whether it is overkill or not with delivering, and if you lose the quality of the gallery or not. I mean,
maybe a better way to ask the question is, are we, and I don't know the answer, by the way, this is a conversation, but are we actually doing potentially, because we were talking about earlier the significance of focusing on the client, serving the client, right? It's about the client at the end of the day. And I understand different photographers' approach will translate to different numbers of images. I guess the better question maybe is, are we actually doing a service or a disservice by delivering so many images? 100%, like, especially if you've got a multi-day event that you're photographing, naturally you're going to have a lot more images. And depending on the culture that we're talking about and the way that the wedding is designed, even more so, right? But at the same time, I just wondering, like, if you have 3,000 pictures, is somebody, or 2,000 pictures, or even 1,500 images, is somebody going to appreciate it? First of all, are they going to actually look at every one of them? And two, are they going to truly appreciate those at the same level if we had delivered, as if we had delivered, say, half that number? What are your thoughts?
I think it's depending on the person. I truly do. I think that if you consistently deliver 1,000 images to a client, if they sit there and actually look through every single image that you took and you delivered, that's great, because, you know, some people want as many photos as they possibly can get out of the photographer. I know that from experience. I know that people say, listen, how many photos are you giving us? And I know that hearing from other people, that even from feedback from other clients, because I will actually sometimes reach out to the couple and say, hey, thank you so much. You know, they'll say we went a different direction. I congratulate them and say, you know, super excited you found a photographer you're excited to work with. Is there anything that we could improve on, you know, in our business that would have helped made your decision easier? And sometimes I've gotten back where it wasn't enough images, or it was actually in some cases too many images, which then thus we brought it back down to, at one point it was 1,000, 1,200. Now we're 800 to 1,000. So I really think it's dependent on the couple. Truthfully, I think it's depending on who the person is. And if you can consistently deliver that same amount of images, anywhere between the 600 to 1,000 range, it's going to touch upon both avenues of people, where who want the little amount of photos and the ones who want a lot of photos. It's kind of the happy medium in between the two, so that you're not overshooting it, but you're also not undershooting it, if that makes sense.
And Nestor actually makes an interesting point on Facebook. He said the more images one gives when shot with purpose, the more they could buy via the galleries we provide them to use. And that's actually a really great point, and kind of a good counter to this conversation, or I guess potentially my argument about shooting too much, is the more that you have, the more opportunity there is in the gallery after the fact to be able to sell, not just to the bride and the groom or whoever you're photographing, but also to family, to friends that you're photographing on that day. There's way more opportunity there to make additional income. So that's definitely an important consideration, or point of consideration, I should say. Well, I appreciate your perspective, Tom. I appreciate you making time to share with our listeners today. And actually, go ahead and give a shout out to you have a photography podcast as well, yeah?
We do, yes. Myself and Christopher Posters, we are the co-hosts of the Capture Crew podcast. You can find us on Apple Music or Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, not YouTube, sorry, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, all those fun things.
All the good ones.
All the good ones. And our website is thecapturecrew.net. But yeah, man, this was great. I hope that people learned something from this. And I'm excited to come back and hopefully talk on another topic one day.
I think we could talk about a lot, actually. And for those of you listening in, if you missed it, Tom Russo, Russo, photography.com for Tom's website, and then Tom Russo Photography on Instagram. And Tom, I didn't actually pop this up earlier, but for anybody listening in, you can see this on screen, or watching live, you can see this on screen. Make sure you go check out Tom's work. It's really, really beautiful work, Tom, as well. So props to you for that. But
Thank you.
We'll link to all of these in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thanks for those of you who joined the conversation, commented, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody again soon. Thanks again.